Real quickly before we begin, I want to thank this video's sponsor, carmarshal.com. Carmarshal.com can save you lots of money on buying used or new vehicles, cars, trucks, school buses. If you want to save money, I'll have a link in the description down below. I know I'm going to
California bill to create Ministry of Truth to censor alternative media. A bill has been proposed in California that would effectively kill free speech by allowing internet censorship that targets everything the state deems as fake news. By John Vibes, April 9, 2018. Legislation is being considered in the state of California that would effectively kill free speech online by placing unprecedented regulations and restrictions on media outlets, especially those who deviate from the official government narrative on controversial issues. The senator who proposed the bill, Richard Penn, was also behind the infamous bill mandating vaccinations for children who attend government schools. According to the text of this bill, titled SB 1424 Internet, Social Media, False Information, Strategic Plan. This bill would require any person who operates a social media, as defined, Internet website with a physical presence in California to develop a strategic plan to verify news stories shared on its website. The bill would require the plan to include, among other things, a plan to mitigate the spread of false information through news stories, the utilization of fact-checkers to verify news stories, providing outreach to social media users, and placing a warning on a news story containing false information. Any person who operates a social media internet website with physical presence in California shall develop a strategic plan to verify news stories shared on its internet website. B. The strategic plan shall include, but is not limited to, all of the following. 1. A plan to mitigate the spread of false information through news stories. 2. The utilization of fact-checkers to verify news stories. 3. Providing outreach to social media users regarding news stories containing false information. 4. Placing a warning on a news story containing false information. C. As used in this section, social media means an electronic service or account, or electronic content, including, but not limited to, videos, still photographs, blogs, video blogs, podcasts, instant and text messages, email, online services, or accounts, or internet website profiles or locations. This bill would place the government of the state of California in a position of arbiter of truth and would allow them to censor any information that runs counter to the official narrative. This is especially dangerous for activists and dissenters, or anyone who finds themselves questioning authority or exposing corruption. The fact-checkers that major platforms like Facebook have relied on in the past are proven to be attack dogs of the establishment, who are obviously approaching the stories with their own subjective bias. For example, PolitiFact was caught changing vital information about Syrian gas attacks when the mainstream narrative on the subject changed. Last month, the Free Thought Project experienced PolitiFact's corruption firsthand, when they marked one of our articles as false because a local police department changed their story after the fact. They also used quotes from our staff out of context. Unsurprisingly, this was an article about guns, the hot-button topic of the week where the mainstream is attempting to control the narrative. Snopes, the most popular fact-checker, is even worse, and we have caught them in multiple lies and deceptions over the years. Just a few months ago, our staff called out Snopes for lying about House Joint Resolution 76, which presented huge Fourth Amendment concerns. Snopes has also been complicit in allowing flimsy stories promoting a new Cold War with Russia to go unchecked for evidence or facts. Last year, Snopes gave the Washington Post a pass, allowing them to publish a false report about the Russians hacking Vermont's power grid. Snopes has been riddled with stories of corruption in recent years, from fraud and embezzlement to using company funds to pay for prostitution. David and Barbara Mickelson, ex-spouses and founders of Snopes, have been mixed up in an ongoing legal battle since their divorce, and many of these details were revealed in court. As the Free Thought Project reported last week, the government of Malaysia recently banned what they deemed to be fake news, and is now threatening 6 years in prison for people who share content that they disagree with. Various neighboring countries in Southeast Asia, including Singapore and the Philippines, are introducing similar laws. Meanwhile, some European countries already have these types of laws on the books. Last year in Germany, legislation was passed that legally forces publishers to delete whatever the state deems to be hate speech or misinformation. Earlier this year, French President Emmanuel Macron called for emergency legal action to crack down on fake news during elections. These governments say that they are protecting their citizens from misinformation, but what they are really doing is protecting themselves from competition. As many of these politicians have pointed out, the sea of information available to us on the internet has fundamentally changed the way that governments operate, and it has stifled their ability to keep the masses of society bound to a particular worldview. Digital cash takes the control the banking elite has over money and gives it back to the people. It is the ultimate weapon in the battle against the money changers and information controllers. If you'd like to start your own wallet and be a part of this change and battle for peace and freedom, you can start right here. Dash is already accepted by vendors all across the world, so you can begin using it immediately. Become a patron.
Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government? Tonight, what if the Constitution no longer applied? What if the whole purpose of the Constitution was to limit the government? What if Congress's enumerated powers in the Constitution no longer limited Congress, but were actually used as a justification to extend Congress's authority over every realm of human life? What if the president, meant to be an equal to Congress, has instead become a democratically elected, term-limited monarch? What if the president assumed that everything he did was legal just because he's the president? What if he could interrupt your regularly scheduled radio and TV programming for a special message from him? What if he could declare war on his own? What if he could read your emails and your texts without a search warrant? What if he could kill you without warning? What if Supreme Court justices no longer looked to the Constitution to determine the constitutionality of a law, but rather simply to what justices who preceded them thought about it? What if the rights and principles guaranteed in the Constitution have been so distorted in the past 200 years as to be unrecognizable by the founders? What if the 50 states were no longer sovereign entities, equals to each other, and parents of the federal government they voluntarily constituted? What if the states were mere provinces of a totally nationalized and fully centralized government? What if the Constitution was amended stealthily, not by constitutional amendments duly ratified by the states, but by the constant and persistent expansion of the federal government's role in our lives? What if the federal government decided if its own powers were proper and constitutional? What if the Constitution were no longer the supreme law of the land? What if you needed a license from the government to speak, to assemble, or to protest against the government? What if the government didn't like what you planned to say, and so it didn't give you the license? What if the right to keep and bear arms only applied to the government? What if posse comitatus, the federal law that prohibits our military from occupying our streets, were no longer in effect? What if the government considered the military an adequate dispenser of domestic law enforcement? What if cops looked and acted like troops and you couldn't distinguish the military from the police? What if you were not secure in your person, in your papers, and in your property? What if federal agents could write their own search warrants in defiance of the Constitution? What if the government could decide when you were and were not entitled to a jury trial? What if the government could take your property whenever it wanted? What if the government could continue prosecuting you until it got the verdict it wanted? What if the government could force you to testify against yourself simply by labeling you a domestic terrorist? What if the government could torture you until you said what the government wanted to hear? What if people running for president actually supported torture? What if the government tortured your children to get to you? What if government judges and government lawyers intimidated juries into convicting the innocent? What if the government could send you to your death and your innocence meant nothing so long as the government's procedures were followed? What if America's prison population, the largest in the world, was a cruel and unusual way for a country to be free? What if half the prison population never harmed anyone but themselves? What if the people had no rights except those the government chose to let them have? What if the states had no rights except to do as the federal government commanded? What if our elected officials didn't really live among us, but instead all had their hearts and homes in Washington, D.C.? What if the government could strip you of your rights because of where your mother was when you were born? What if the income tax was unconstitutional? What if the states were convinced to give up their representation in Congress? What if the government tried to ban you from using a substance in your body that is older than the government itself? What if voting didn't mean anything anymore because both political parties stand for big government? What if the government could write any law, regulate any behavior, and tax any event? The Constitution be damned. What if the government was the reason we don't have a Constitution anymore? What if you could love your country but hate what the government has done to it? What if sometimes to love your country you had to alter or abolish the government? What if Jefferson was right? What if that government is best which governs least? What if I'm right? What if the government is wrong? What if it is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong? What if it is better to perish fighting for freedom than to live as a slave? What if freedom's greatest hour of danger is now?
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I just wanted you to know that I am using this stuff under fair use. And also remember to like and subscribe this channel. Also too, keep in mind I do not make any money on YouTube. This is 5 hours work a day, you know, fighting for freedom. And you can donate with PayPal and Patreon. I just want you to think about this. If everybody gives to PayPal and Patreon, Patreon is every month. Actually, PayPal you can do every month. I have 12,000 subscribers. If everybody gives, I can quit my regular job and go full-time investigations on Charlotte County and possibly even more and beyond. So just keep that in mind. If everybody helps out, I can go full-time doing this. Thanks.